Suppose we could treat cancers by blocking those pipes.
Today we get to hear from a physicist, entrepreneur, and the author of the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Loonshots. From the back of the book, a loonshot is a neglected project, widely dismissed, its champion written off as unhinged. Safi knew one of these loonshot people champions personally. He's going to tell us his story, and at the end, give us a summary of 3 points we can take away and apply from Loonshots. Let's hear what he has to say.
There is a phrase that has stayed with me for many years that comes from a guy that I worked with for many years, who probably would have won the Nobel Prize had he lived just a few years longer. And his name was Judah Folkman, and he was a surgeon. He was a pediatric surgeon, chief of surgery at Boston Children's Hospital. And when he was a young man, he came up with a pretty crazy idea. He'd been operating on patients with cancer, let's say lung cancer, and he'd seen that those tumors had all these little blood vessels around them. And he came up with this idea. He said, what about if we were to prevent tumors from growing new blood vessels? It seems to me those blood vessels weren't there before, so when a cancer grows, when a tumor grows, it must be sending out some kind of weird signal, mysterious signal to the body to put in these new blood vessels, to bring in oxygen, bring in nutrients, and take out waste. Just like when you're building a home, you have to lay pipes to bring in the water, bring in the supplies, and remove waste. And he said, suppose we could treat cancers by blocking those pipes, just blocking their ability to grow. And people said, you're crazy. People said, there's only 2 ways to treat cancer. At the time that was the case. They said, there's only 2 ways. You either poison a tumor, that's like taking chemotherapy, or you burn it, you irradiate it with radiation. And what are these mysterious signals? That just sounds silly. For 32 years, every year he was ridiculed, not just by people in competing labs or in the media, but also by people in his own institution. He was asked to step down as chief of surgery and resign if he wanted to continue the research, which he did. He stepped down and continued the research. He thought it was too important to let it go. And 32 years after he published his idea, in 2003, a scientist stood up to a podium in a keynote in the Chicago Convention Center, the biggest cancer meeting in the world, and flipped a slide showing the results from the largest trial ever run to that date in patients with colon cancer, with advanced metastatic colon cancer, demonstrating unequivocally that patients who received the drug based on Judah's ideas lived longer than anybody had ever lived in any clinical trial before with this disease. And he got a standing ovation. It was a triumph. And I remember he told the story. He was there in the audience, and the speaker said, if only Dr. Folkman were alive to see this. And he just turned to his friend and smiled. But he loved telling that story. But years later, I asked him, how did he persist through all this criticism and ridicule? He once said how he would get grants rejected. His grant proposals sometimes contained the word clown, and people just made fun of him. He said he would stand up to give a talk at a conference, and the whole room would suddenly empty out. He said it's as if people all of a sudden had to go to the bathroom simultaneously. Just people would leave. And I asked him, how did he persist? And he said something to me that has stayed with me to this day. He said, there are no experts in the future. Some of the things about nurturing these crazy ideas or these loonshots that you need to know. One is they're surprisingly fragile. 3 deaths of the loonshots. 2 is listen to the suck. Listen to the suck with curiosity. Don't just dismiss or attack or reject, but try to really pull on that thread and tease out the nugget of, what's the little nugget of gold at the end of that thread that could help you with your idea. And don't fail fast and pivot. Persist. So those are kind of the 3 things. If you want to learn how to nurture loonshots better, those are some of the things that you need to know.
Safi, great job. Thanks for the tips. You spent a lot of time researching Loonshots all over. Thanks for sharing that wisdom. The story of Judah is just a few pages from the book Loonshots, so pick up the book if you're interested in that. As pie growers, we're going to need creative ideas. We're going to need persistence if we're going to grow the pie, if we're going to make it better for you, for me, create win-win situations. For more on pie growers, you can visit piegrowers.com. We'll see you next time.